I don't want to leave the impression that I think that justice can easily be automated, for instance. I don't think so at all. That's what justice is about, judgment. On the other hand, facilitating people's access to knowledge about how to seek justice and recourse is very important, and the internet has an increasingly important role in that. It's certainly important to recognize that if you depend upon infrastructure and it isn't available, this can interfere with your plans. But the same could be said for electricity. I mean, think about the justice system of today. Electricity is fairly important to keep the buildings open, the doors unlocked, the elevators working, the lights on, and so on. And when it isn't available, justice may be difficult to deliver because of the absence of electricity. The same argument might be made in the absence of networking capability. Or the thing that makes it more complicated is that the objects of justice often involve recorded history. This whole notion of case law, which influences subsequent opinions issued by the courts, means that the case law needs to be accessible. And increasingly, we're finding that case law showing up in online digital formats. So one very interesting question is how to assure that the digital content is going to be available when it's needed. And second, that if it is accessible, do we know how to interpret it correctly? I don't mean in the sense of its meaning, but rather in the sense of figuring out how to render a digital object. What happens if 100 years from now somebody wants to look up court cases that have some relevance to a then existing new case, and it turns out that a lot of the documentation is written in some format which is no longer in use? How do you render that to somebody? I mean, if it's a text document coming from some proprietary format or implemented in a proprietary format, if you don't have the software anymore that knows how to render that, you may not be able to read the document. So there's this sort of, we need a digital vellum in the sense that we need to have the ability to preserve our access to and ability to render content over long periods of time, because justice is not something that happens in the morning, it's something that happens over long periods of time. So there's the fragility of the system, which needs to be taken into account, and there is the resilience of the system. And I am pretty confident that we can build pretty resilient capabilities into networks, for example. The internet has been in operation since 1983, and even though there are incidents where it's not accessible to some group of people, it's never been completely taken down since it was turned on in 1983, at least to my knowledge. So I'm less worried about that than I am about this problem of making sure that the content of the net, which is relevant to justice, is in fact accessible and renderable and understandable over long periods of time.